You actually think you're going to keep that money? The question came from Victoria Whitmore Preston, her perfectly manicured finger pointed at me like a weapon across the mahogany table in the lawyer's office. Everyone was staring. The entire Whitmore family, their lawyers, even the secretary by the door. All eyes on me, the maid who'd just inherited $300 million. I want to talk to you for a moment before we dive deep into this story.
How are you doing today?
Where are you watching from? I hope you're somewhere comfortable because once this story starts, you won't be able to stop listening. This is about betrayal, justice, and what happens when people who've treated you like furniture for 20 years suddenly realize you matter. Stick with me through this. Like, subscribe, and comment where you're from because you're going to want to discuss this one when it's over. See, people think they understand karma. They think it's some mystical force that eventually catches up with bad people. But real karma isn't mystical at all. It's just truth, waiting patiently for its moment. And that moment? It was happening right now, in this lawyer's office, with a family who'd never learned my daughter's name suddenly very interested in my life story. My name is Naomi Brooks. I'm 52 years old, and until 3 days ago, I was invisible. Not literally, of course. But to the Whitmore family, I might as well have been. 23 years I worked in that mansion. 23 years of Naomi, the linens need changing, and Naomi, we're having guests, and Naomi, make sure you use the back entrance. 23 years of watching them throw away more food in a week than I spent on groceries in a month. 23 years of being in every room of that house but never really being seen. Now they saw me. This is the story of how I went from being the invisible help to the woman who inherited everything they believed was rightfully theirs. And if you think that inheritance was about money, you haven't been paying attention to how the world really works. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before that lawyer read Charles Whitmore's will out loud and changed my life forever. I was 29 when I first knocked on the service door of the Whitmore estate in 2001. I had a 6-year-old daughter named Maya, 2 jobs that barely paid rent, and exactly $43 in my checking account. My mama had just died from breast cancer, leaving me with $20,000 in medical debt and a belief that hard work and faith would see me through anything. The Whitmores needed a live-in housekeeper. The job came with a small apartment above the garage, health insurance, and a salary that was 3 times what I was making cleaning office buildings at night. It felt like a miracle. I remember thinking God had finally heard my prayers. I believed in miracles back then. I believed in good people. I believed that if you worked hard, stayed humble, and treated others with respect, life would treat you fairly in return. I believed that wealthy people got that way through hard work and intelligence, not inheritance and cruelty. I believed Charles Whitmore was a good man because he built hospitals and donated to charities and smiled in all those magazine photos. I believed his children were just misunderstood. That Victoria was sharp-tongued because she was smart. That Reginald was distant because he was focused on business. That Vivian was flighty because she was creative. I made excuses for them the way you make excuses for people you work for because you have to believe the best about them to survive the worst. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was. But isn't that how they get you? They make you feel grateful for the opportunity to serve them. They make you feel like you should be thankful they're even letting you breathe their air. The day I moved into that apartment above the garage, I thought I'd won the lottery. Maya had her own room for the first time in her life. We had health insurance. I could stop working 3 jobs and actually see my daughter before she went to bed. Charles Whitmore himself came out to welcome me, shook my hand, told me he valued hard work and loyalty. "We take care of our people here, Naomi," he said. "You take care of us. We'll take care of you." I believed him. That's the thing about people like Charles Whitmore. They're good at making you believe. 23 years later, sitting in that lawyer's office with his entire family glaring at me like I'd stolen something that belonged to them, I finally understood what he meant. He did take care of me, just not in any way his family could comprehend. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Those first few years working for the Whitmores, I was determined to be perfect. I learned how Victoria liked her coffee, black with exactly 1 sugar cube, served at 7 a.m. in a china cup with a gold rim. I learned that Reginald needed his shirts pressed a specific way, collars first, and that he'd notice immediately if you did it wrong. I learned that Vivian would leave wet towels on the bathroom floor and half-eaten meals on her nightstand, then complain if her room wasn't spotless. I learned that Mrs. Whitmore, Catherine, was different from the rest of them. Catherine Whitmore was dying when I arrived, though nobody told me that at first. Ovarian cancer, stage 4. She had maybe 6 months left, and she spent most of that time in the master bedroom, in a hospital bed that seemed too small for the enormous room, surrounded by flowers that couldn't quite cover the smell of sickness. The family barely visited her. Victoria came by once a week, spent exactly 15 minutes asking about the will, then left. Reginald would stick his head in the door, ask how she was feeling, not wait for an answer. Vivian couldn't handle it at all, said the sick room made her depressed. But I was there. Every day, I brought Catherine her meals, helped her to the bathroom, changed her sheets, read to her when she couldn't sleep. That wasn't in my job description. Whitmore's had hired a nurse for the medical stuff. But Catherine would ask for me specifically. Is Naomi here? Can you send Naomi up? We'd talk for hours. She told me about growing up poor in South Carolina, about meeting Charles when he was still building his first hotel, about how money changed people in ways you don't expect. She told me about her children, how she'd tried so hard to keep them grounded, how the wealth had poisoned them anyway. They weren't always like this, she'd say, her voice weak. Or maybe they were, and I just didn't want to see it. Catherine died on a Tuesday in February 2002, with me holding her hand. The family was at some charity gala. The nurse had stepped out for coffee. It was just the two of us in that big bedroom, and Catherine looked at me with eyes that were already seeing somewhere else. You're a good person, Naomi, she whispered. Don't let them make you small. Those were her last words. Not to her husband, not to her children. To me, the maid. I didn't understand what she meant then. I do now. After Catherine died, something changed in that house. It got colder somehow, like she'd been the only warm thing in it. Charles threw himself into work, barely home except to sleep. The children came around more often, but only to argue about money, about their trust funds, about who was getting which properties. And I became even more invisible, which was fine with me, honestly. I had Maya to raise. I had a job that paid well and gave us stability. I didn't need to be seen by people who looked through me anyway. Maya thrived. She went to a good public school, made friends, joined the debate team. She was smart, so smart it scared me sometimes. She'd ask questions about the Whitmores, about why they had so much when other people had so little, about why I had to use the service entrance when I'd been working there for years. It's just how things are, I'd tell her. We're blessed to have what we have. But Maya didn't buy it. Even as a kid, she saw through the performance. She'd see how Victoria talked to me, how Reginald would snap his fingers to get my attention like I was a dog. One time, when she was about 12, she told me I should quit. They don't respect you, Mom. They treat you like you're nothing. Baby, it's just a job, I said. They're paying for your braces, your school trips, your college fund. We can handle a little disrespect. The look she gave me then, I'll never forget it. Disappointment, mixed with love. Like she understood why I was doing it but wished I didn't have to. Years passed. Maya went to college on a scholarship, got a degree in social work, moved to Atlanta. I kept working for the Whitmores, kept being invisible, kept believing that if I just did my job well enough, it would all mean something eventually. Then Charles got sick. It started small. He'd forget things, lose his train of thought mid-sentence. The family wrote it off as stress, old age. But I saw it happening. I was the one who found him wandering the hallway at 2 a.m. in his pajamas, confused about where he was. I was the one who noticed he'd started wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row, something Charles Whitmore would never have done before. Dementia. That's what the doctors called it. Early onset, aggressive. He was only 68. The family's response was predictable. Victoria wanted to move him to a facility. Reginald wanted to get power of attorney and take over the business immediately. Vivian just cried and said she couldn't handle watching another parent deteriorate. But Charles refused to go anywhere, and he specifically requested that I be his primary caregiver. Naomi takes care of me, He'd tell the doctors, the lawyers, anyone who'd listen. I trust Naomi. His family was furious, but what could they do? He was still competent enough to make his own medical decisions. So, I became Charles Whitmore's caretaker. They hired nurses for the overnight shifts, but during the day, it was me. Helping him dress, making his meals, sitting with him when he got confused, reading to him from the financial papers he could no longer understand. And he talked. Oh, he talked. When dementia strips away your filter, the truth comes out in ways people don't expect. He told me about his regrets. About how he'd prioritized money over Catherine, work over his children. About deals he'd made that hurt people, corners he'd cut, lives he'd ruined in the pursuit of building his empire. About how his children had turned out exactly as he'd shaped them to be, and how much he hated seeing his own worst qualities reflected back at him. "They'll waste it all," he said one day, looking out the window at the gardens Catherine had planted. "Everything I built. They'll tear each other apart fighting over it, then squander what's left. They don't know the value of anything. It's their inheritance," I said, because what else could I say? "They'll figure it out." "Inheritance," he repeated, like the word tasted bitter. "You know what I'm leaving them, Naomi? The same thing my father left me. The burden of never being satisfied. The curse of having everything and appreciating nothing." I didn't understand then. I thought he was just rambling, the dementia talking. But Charles was more lucid than anyone realized. 3 months before he died, his lawyer came to the house. Anthony Castellano, a man I'd seen maybe twice in 23 years. Charles had me stay in the room while they talked, even though Victoria was there, protesting that this was family business. "Naomi is the only family I have left who gives a damn about me as a person," Charles said. It was one of his clear days, when the fog lifted and you could see the sharp businessman he used to be. "She stays." Victoria left in a fury. And Charles spent the next 2 hours with his lawyer, making changes to his will while I sat in the corner, pretending not to listen but hearing every word. I should have known something was coming. But you don't expect things like that. You don't expect a billionaire to look at his maid and see someone worth more than his own children. Charles died on October 15, 2024. Heart attack in his sleep. Peaceful, the doctors said. I found him that morning when I brought his breakfast tray up. He looked calm, almost relieved. I called the family. They came immediately, suddenly interested in being present.
Victoria creit perfectly mascaratears.
Reginald made phone calls about funeral arrangements. Vivian posted a tribute on social media before his body was even cold. I packed up my cleaning supplies and prepared to move out. I'd been there 23 years, but I knew how this worked. They'd sell the estate, distribute the assets, and the staff would be let go with maybe a small severance if we were lucky. I'd started looking at apartments, calculating what I could afford on my savings. The funeral was massive. Hundreds of people who'd never visited Charles while he was sick, suddenly devastated by his loss. I sat in the back of the church, in my black dress from Target, watching the family play their parts perfectly. A week later, Anthony Castellano called me, asked me to come to his office for the reading of the will. I almost didn't go. That wasn't for people like me. But he insisted. Said Charles had specifically requested my presence. So I went, expecting maybe a small bequest. Maybe a few $1,000s for my years of service. Maybe a nice letter thanking me for my care. That's what people like the Whitmores did for their longtime servants. A token gesture. I walked into that conference room and saw the entire Whitmore family already seated. Victoria in her designer suit, Reginald checking his phone, Vivian dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. They barely acknowledged me when I entered. Victoria actually sighed, annoyed that they had to wait for the help before starting. Anthony Castellano was professional, but I could see something in his eyes. Something that looked almost like anticipation. He opened the will and started reading the formal language, the legal jargon that all sounded the same. Then he got to the distribution of assets. I, Charles Edward Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, assets, investments, and holdings, estimated at a total value of $300 million, to Naomi Catherine Brooks, in gratitude for her loyalty, her integrity, and her exemplary character over the past 23 years of service. The room went silent. Completely, absolutely silent. I didn't understand what I'd heard. I must have misheard. There was no way. I'm sorry, what? Victoria's voice cut through the silence, like glass breaking. What did you just say? Anthony repeated it. Slower this time, each word a hammer blow to the Whitmores' expectations. Everything. Charles had left me everything. This is insane. Reginald stood up, his face turning red. He was mentally incompetent. He had dementia. This will is invalid. Mr. Whitmore had this will drafted and signed 3 months before his death, Anthony said calmly. During a period when 3 separate doctors had evaluated him and found him mentally competent to make legal decisions. I have all the documentation. There's no way. Vivian was shaking her head. No way my father would do this. She must have manipulated him, influenced him somehow. The will was written of his own volition, Anthony continued, with no outside influence. In fact, he wrote an additional letter explaining his reasoning, which I'm required to read to you now. That's when Victoria turned to me. That's when she pointed her finger and asked that question. You actually think you're going to keep that money? And I realized, sitting there in that chair, with $300 million I'd never asked for and a family who'd never seen me suddenly unable to look away, that everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change. Because this wasn't just about money. This was about power, legacy, and 23 years of a family taking someone for granted without ever bothering to see who she really was. This was about to get very ugly. But here's what the Whitmores didn't know, sitting there in their rage and disbelief. Here's what I didn't even fully understand yet. Charles hadn't just left me his fortune. He'd left me the truth. About Catherine, about their marriage, about secrets this family had buried so deep they'd forgotten they existed. And that truth? That was worth more than $300 million. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me tell you what happened next, because you need to understand how people react when their whole world gets turned upside down by someone they never thought mattered. The letter Anthony read after that bombshell announcement started with 2 words that made Victoria's perfectly composed face finally crack. Dear Naomi. Not to my children. Not to my family. Dear Naomi. Anthony's voice was steady as he read Charles's words, but I could barely hear them over the pounding of my heart. The Whitmores were staring at me like I'd murdered someone. Maybe in their minds I had. I'd murdered their future, their expectations, their birthright. Naomi, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if I know my children at all, they're currently losing their minds. Let them. You've earned every penny of what I'm leaving you, though I know you never asked for it and probably don't want it. That's exactly why you deserve it. I could see Victoria's jaw clenching. Reginald had his phone out, probably texting his lawyer already. Vivian was crying, but these weren't delicate social tears anymore. These were angry, disbelieving sobs. For 23 years, you cared for my wife and then for me. Not because you had to, but because you're a decent human being. You're the only person in my life who never wanted anything from me except a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. In a world full of people with their hands out, you just kept your head down and did what was right. Anthony paused, glanced at me, then continued. My children will contest this will. They'll claim I was incompetent, that you manipulated me, that you're not entitled to what I built.
Let them try.
I've made sure every legal avenue is closed to them. But Naomi, what I need you to understand is this. You're not just inheriting my money. You're inheriting the responsibility of setting something right that I should have fixed years ago. In the safe deposit box at First National, Box 847, you'll find documents that explain everything. The key is with Anthony. Trust him. Trust yourself. And don't let my children bully you into giving up what's yours. God knows they bullied everyone else. The letter ended. Anthony folded it carefully and set it on the table. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then Victoria exploded. This is theft, she said, standing up so fast her chair rolled backward.
Legal theft.
She clearly manipulated a sick old man. Mrs. Preston, I'd be very careful about making accusations of that nature, Anthony said. They could be considered defamatory. Defamatory? Defamatory. Victoria's voice went shrill. This woman has stolen my family's entire fortune, and you're worried about defamation? Your father's fortune, Anthony corrected, which he was entitled to distribute as he saw fit. We're challenging this, Reginald said. He'd stood up too, was putting his phone away. We'll have an army of lawyers here by tomorrow. We'll prove he wasn't competent, that he pointed at me like I was evidence in a crime scene, that she took advantage of a vulnerable elderly man. You do what you need to do, Anthony said calmly. But I'd advise you to read the will in its entirety first. Your father was very thorough. He anticipated every challenge you might raise. And he left documentation that will make any contest very difficult and very public. What's that supposed to mean? Vivian asked through her tears. It means your father kept records. Of everything. Financial records, medical records, personal records. And if you force this into court, all of it becomes public record. I don't think any of you want that. The threat hung in the air. I still hadn't said a word.
Couldn't.
My brain was trying to process what was happening, but it felt like trying to understand a language I'd never heard before. $300 million. I'd never had more than $5,000 in my bank account at once in my entire life. 300 million was incomprehensible. It was a number you heard on the news, not something that happened to actual people. Definitely not something that happened to maids from Atlanta who'd spent their whole lives just trying to keep their heads above water. This isn't over, Victoria said, grabbing her purse. Not even close. Come on. She gestured to her siblings. Reginald followed immediately. Vivian hesitated, looked at me for a long moment with something I couldn't quite read in her eyes, then left too.
The door closed.
Silence filled the room like water rushing into a sinking ship. I don't understand, I finally said. My voice sounded strange, distant. Why would he do this? Anthony smiled. It was kind, paternal. Why don't we talk in my private office? There's more you need to know. We moved to a smaller room, just the two of us. Anthony poured me a glass of water I didn't remember asking for. My hands were shaking when I took it. Naomi, how much did Catherine tell you about her past? He asked. The question surprised me.
Some.
She grew up poor in South Carolina. Met Charles when she was working as a waitress and he was building his first hotel. Why? Did she ever mention her family? Her sisters specifically? I thought back to those long hours sitting with Catherine while she was dying. She said she had a sister she lost touch with, that there was some kind of falling out. She seemed sad about it. Anthony opened a folder on his desk, pulled out a photograph. Black and white, old, creased. Two young black women, their arms around each other, laughing at the camera. That's Catherine on the left, he said. Recognize the woman on the right? I looked closer. The face was younger, the hair different, but the eyes, the smile. My chest went tight. That's my mother. Catherine Whitmore and Grace Brooks were sisters, Anthony said gently. Which made Charles Whitmore your uncle by marriage. And you, Naomi, were family long before you ever knocked on their door looking for a job. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to keep the floor from dropping out from under me. That's impossible. My mother never. She would have told me. Your mother and Catherine had a falling out in 1973, 2 years before you were born. From what Catherine told Charles, it was over a man. Your father, actually. Both sisters loved him. He chose Grace. Catherine never forgave her for it, even though Catherine went on to marry Charles and become wealthy beyond imagination. Some wounds don't heal just because you get rich. I was shaking my head, but pieces were falling into place. Things my mother had said over the years, things I'd never thought about too hard. How she'd always told me to be strong, to never depend on family because family could turn on you. How she'd worked herself to death rather than ask anyone for help. How when I got the job at the Whitmore estate and told her about it, she'd gone quiet for a long time before saying, just do your work and don't expect anything from people like that. Did she know? I asked. When I took the job, did my mother know I was working for her sister? I don't think so, Catherine didn't use her maiden name publicly after she married. And your mother died just a few months after you started working there, didn't she? Cancer. The word came out hollow. She died in 2002. Catherine died the same year. I think, and this is just speculation, I think Catherine saw you when you came to interview for that job and recognized Grace's daughter. I think hiring you was her way of reconnecting with a sister she'd lost, without having to admit she'd been wrong all those years ago. She never said anything. 23 years, and she never told me. Pride is a powerful thing, Naomi. Catherine struggled with it her whole life. She told Charles the truth on her deathbed, made him promise to take care of you, to treat you like family. He didn't though, I said, and there was more bitterness in my voice than I'd expected. He treated me like the help, just like everyone else. Did he? Anthony asked. Or did he treat you exactly like he treated his own children?
Think about it.
He was distant with them, buried in work. He was distant with you, buried in work. But when he got sick, when he needed someone, who did he ask for? Not Victoria or Reginald or Vivian. You. I thought about those last years with Charles. How he'd insisted I be his caretaker. How he'd told his children that I was the only one who cared about him as a person. How he'd had me stay in the room during private conversations with his lawyer. He was protecting me, I whispered, from them. He was making sure you knew the truth. And making sure you'd be taken care of after he was gone. Charles Whitmore made a lot of mistakes in his life, Naomi. He was ruthless in business, distant as a father, and probably not the husband Catherine deserved. But he understood loyalty. And he understood that the family he was born into, the family he created with Catherine, had failed both of you. So he made a new choice. Anthony slid a key across the desk. Small, brass, with a number stamped on it. 847. Everything you need is in that safe deposit box. Documents proving the family connection. Letters from Catherine explaining everything. And some other things you'll need to see for yourself. I took the key. It felt heavy, like it weighed more than brass should. The Whitmores are going to fight this, Anthony said. They're going to claim you manipulated Charles, that the will is invalid, that you're not entitled to any of it. They're going to try to destroy your reputation, dig into your past, turn you into a villain. Are you ready for that?
Was I?
24 hours ago, I was a maid planning to find a new job and a cheaper apartment. Now I was a secret family member who'd inherited $300 million from a man I'd thought of as my employer, not my uncle. I don't want their money, I said. I never asked for any of this. I know. That's why Charles left it to you. But Naomi, it's not just about money. It's about what Charles wanted you to do with it. He left instructions in the safe deposit box. A plan. He spent his whole life building an empire, and now he's trusting you to use it the right way. The way he should have from the beginning. What if I can't? What if I mess it all up? Then you'll mess it up trying to do something good. Which is more than his children would have done. Anthony stood up, came around the desk. Go to the bank tomorrow. Read everything. Then decide what you want to do. But know this, you've got the best legal team in the state protecting that will. The Whitmores can fight all they want, but they're not going to win. Charles made sure of it. I left his office in a daze. Walked out to my 15-year-old Honda in the parking garage, sat in the driver's seat, and just stared at nothing for 20 minutes. My phone buzzed. Text message from Maya. Mom, I just saw something online about the Whitmore will. Is it true? Call me. Before I could respond, another text came in. Unknown number. You have 48 hours to renounce the inheritance and sign everything over to the family. If you don't, we'll destroy you. This is your only warning. No signature. Didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was from.
My phone rang. Maya.
I answered.
Mom?
Mom, what's going on? There's articles saying you inherited the entire Whitmore fortune. That can't be right. Baby, I need to call you back. Something's happened and I need to figure it out. Are you okay? Do you need me to come home? Did I? Maya had her own life in Atlanta, her own job. She was supposed to fly to New York next week for a conference. I couldn't pull her into this mess. I'm fine. I promise. Just give me a day to sort through everything. Mom, if that article is true, if you really inherited all that money. I know. It's complicated. No, listen to me. Don't let them bully you. Those people treated you like garbage for 23 years. If Mr. Whitmore wanted you to have his money, you earned it. Don't you dare give it back just because they're making you feel guilty. My daughter, always so fierce. Always so sure of what was right. I love you, baby. I love you too. Call me tomorrow after you've had time to think. And Mom, congratulations. You deserve every penny. She hung up. I sat in my car, holding my phone, holding that brass key, holding onto the edges of a life that had just completely changed shape. I should have gone home. Should have slept on it, processed it, approached everything with a clear head. But I couldn't wait. I drove to First National Bank, walked up to the after-hours service desk, and asked to access my safe deposit box. Box number, the attendant asked. 847. She looked it up on her computer, frowned. This box is registered to Charles Whitmore and requires authorization from... Oh. She'd seen the note on the account. You're Naomi Brooks? Yes. I'll need to see ID and the key. I provided both. She led me to the vault, used her key and mine to open the box, then left me alone in the small private room. The box was larger than I expected. Inside were folders, documents, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Catherine's handwriting. I opened the envelope first. Dear Naomi, it began. Just like Charles's letter. Like they'd both known they were writing to family. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and my secret has died with me. Except it hasn't, because Charles promised to tell you the truth. Your mother was my baby sister, and I loved her more than anyone in this world until I hated her for taking the only man I'd ever loved. Your father was a good man. He made the right choice choosing Grace. She was always the better person. But I couldn't forgive her for it. My pride wouldn't let me. The letter continued for 3 pages. Catherine explaining how she'd recognized me the day I came to interview, how she'd hired me because she needed to be close to the family she'd rejected. How she'd watched me raise Maya, watched me work myself to exhaustion, watched me be strong the way Grace had always been strong. How guilty she'd felt keeping the secret. How she'd made Charles promise to take care of me after she was gone. You deserved better than what I gave you, Naomi. You deserved to know who you were, to know that you had family in that house beyond the people who treated you like help. I was a coward. I let my pride keep me from claiming you as my niece, from giving you the life you should have had. I let you serve me when you should have been sitting at my table.
Charles wanted to tell you.
I made him promise not to. That's on me. The last paragraph made my hands shake so hard I almost dropped the letter. I'm leaving you something in this box. Something that belongs to you by right. Charles doesn't know about it, and neither do my children. It's the only thing I ever kept from my husband, and I kept it because it was my connection to Grace, to the life I should have valued more than the one I chose. Use it however you see fit. And Naomi, if you can find it in your heart, forgive me. I never stopped loving my sister, even when I pretended she didn't exist. Inside the box was a smaller metal box, old and tarnished. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a diamond necklace that looked like something from a museum. Antique, intricate, clearly worth a fortune. And underneath it, a photograph of a young black woman wearing that same necklace. My grandmother, I realized. Catherine, and my mother's mother. A note card explained, "This necklace has been in our family for 4 generations. It was meant to go to the eldest daughter. That was me. But I'm giving it to you, Naomi, because you're Grace's daughter, and Grace should have had it. It's worth approximately $12 million. It's yours now. Your legacy. Your family history. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong." $12 million. In a necklace I'd never known existed, from a grandmother I'd never met, through an aunt who'd never claimed me. I put the necklace back carefully, moved to the documents. Financial records showing decades of Charles's business dealings. Some were normal corporate stuff I didn't understand. But others made my blood run cold. Reginald had been embezzling from the company for 6 years. Nearly $20 million, moved through shell corporations and offshore accounts. Charles had known, had documented everything, had never confronted his son about it, just quietly tracked every illegal transaction. Victoria had been blackmailing one of Charles's business partners over an affair, threatening to tell the man's wife unless he gave her insider trading information. Charles had recordings, transcripts, everything needed to prosecute her for securities fraud. Vivian's art gallery, the one she claimed she'd built herself, had been laundering money for a real estate developer who was later indicted for fraud. She'd claimed ignorance, said she had no idea her biggest client was a criminal. But there were emails proving she'd known exactly what was happening and had taken a cut of the illegal profits. Charles had dirt on all of them, and he'd left it all to me. There was a note in his handwriting at the bottom of the file. "They're my children and I love them, but they're exactly what's wrong with people who inherit wealth without earning it. They think they're entitled to everything and responsible for nothing. Use this information however you need to. They'll come after you, Naomi. Don't let them win." I sat in that small room in the bank vault for 2 hours, reading through everything, learning secrets about a family I'd worked for but never really known, understanding exactly what I was up against. The Whitmores weren't just going to challenge the will. They were going to try to destroy me. And they had the money, the connections, the power to do it. But now I had something too. I had the truth. I had evidence. I had $300 million and the best legal team money could buy. And I had something they'd never understood, never valued, never thought mattered. I had nothing to lose. When you've spent your whole life being invisible, being underestimated, being dismissed, you learn how to survive. You learn how to see things other people miss. You learn how to be patient, how to wait for your moment. My moment had arrived. I put everything back in the safe deposit box, except the necklace. That I took with me. It felt right, carrying my grandmother's legacy against my chest as I walked out of that bank into the cool evening air. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another text. "We know where your daughter works. We know where she lives. Sign over the inheritance, or she'll suffer for your greed." They'd threatened Maya. My baby. My whole world. That's when something hardened inside me. That's when I stopped feeling guilty about inheriting money I never asked for. That's when I understood exactly what Charles had been trying to tell me. This wasn't about money. This was about justice. About people who'd spent their whole lives taking whatever they wanted, treating people like property, believing they were untouchable because of their name and their wealth. I called Anthony Castellano. "They threatened my daughter," I said when he answered. "I was expecting that," he said grimly. "Did you get it in writing?" "Text message. 2 of them. Forward them to me immediately. We're filing for restraining order first thing tomorrow morning. And Naomi? Don't respond to them. Don't engage. Let me handle it. There's something else." I went to the safe deposit box. "And there's enough evidence in there to put all 3 of them in prison. Did you know about it?" I knew Charles was documenting their activities. I didn't know specifics. He kept that close to the vest. He wants me to use it. To protect myself. Do you want to? Did I? Using that evidence meant destroying whatever was left of that family. It meant exposing their crimes, their corruption, their complete disregard for the law. It meant sending Catherine's children to prison. But they'd threatened Maya. They'd crossed the one line I'd never forgive. "Yes," I said. "I want to use it. All of it. But not yet. Let them make the first move. Let them think they're winning." "You're learning fast," Anthony said, and I could hear the approval in his voice. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." I drove back to the apartment above the garage. My home for 23 years. I'd have to move out soon, I realized. This was their property now. Or rather, it was my property. I owned the mansion, the grounds, all of it. The absurdity hit me and I started laughing. Couldn't stop. Stood in my little apartment, surrounded by secondhand furniture and clearance rack clothes, laughing until tears ran down my face. I owned it all. Every brick, every blade of grass, every crystal chandelier I'd spent years dusting. The invisible Maid had inherited the entire kingdom. My laughter died when I saw the envelope that had been slipped under my door. Legal letterhead. From Whitmore Family Attorneys. They were moving faster than I'd expected. I opened it, read through the dense legal language. They were challenging the will on grounds of mental incompetence and undue influence. They were requesting an immediate freeze on all assets pending the outcome of their challenge. They were demanding I vacate the property within 7 days. And there, at the bottom, a personal note in Victoria's handwriting. You may have fooled my father, but you don't fool me. I know exactly what you are. A opportunistic scavenger who manipulated a sick old man. My family has lawyers that will bury you so deep you'll forget what sunlight looks like. Walk away now while you still can. This is your last chance. I thought about my mother, working 3 jobs to keep us fed. I thought about Catherine, dying alone while her children attended charity galas. I thought about Charles, choosing me over his own blood because I'd shown him basic human decency. I thought about Maya, brilliant and fierce, telling me I'd earned every penny. I took out my phone and texted Maya. Change of plans, baby. I need you to come home. We're going to war. She responded immediately. On my way. Nobody threatens my mom and gets away with it. What do you need? A good lawyer, your social work connections, and someone to remind me that I'm not crazy for fighting back. You're not crazy. You're finally done being invisible. I'll be there tomorrow morning.
Love you, Mom.
We've got this. I looked around my small apartment one more time, at the life I'd built in the margins of someone else's wealth, at the invisibility I'd worn like armor for so long I'd forgotten there was a person underneath. That person was done hiding. I sat down at my kitchen table and started making lists. People I'd need to call. Things I'd need to do. Ways to fight back against a family that had never fought fair a day in their lives. They thought they could intimidate me into giving up. They thought I'd crumble under pressure, run away from conflict, know my place. They'd spent 23 years not seeing me. That was about to become their biggest mistake. The news broke before I'd even had my morning coffee. Billionaire's Maid steals fortune. Whitmore family fights back against alleged elder abuse. That was the headline on every major news site by 6 a.m. Victoria had gone to the press. And she hadn't just gone. She'd orchestrated a full media campaign. My phone was ringing off the hook. News outlets, reporters, people I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly very interested in my life story. I turned it off after the 15th call. Maya arrived at 8, took one look at my face, and hugged me tight. They're calling me a thief, I said into her shoulder. They're saying I abused him. Let them talk. We know the truth. She pulled back, held my shoulders. Did you call Anthony? He called me. Press conference at noon. He says we go on offense, not defense.
Good.
What do you need me to do? Before I could answer, someone knocked on my door. Hard, official knocks. Sheriff's deputy. Holding an eviction notice. Naomi Brooks? You need to vacate this property by 5 p.m. today. Family has requested immediate removal of all non-essential personnel. I own this property, I said. My voice shook, but I kept it steady. Ma'am, there's a dispute about that. Until it's resolved, the Whitmore family has the right to control access. You've got until 5. He left the notice and walked away. Maya was already on her phone. I'm calling a moving company. We'll get your stuff out today. Where are we going? I don't know. I haven't had time to think. The Whitmore Plaza Hotel. Anthony's voice came from behind me. He'd walked up so quietly I hadn't heard him.
Charles owned it outright.
It's technically yours now, and the family can't touch it without violating the temporary asset freeze I got issued an hour ago. The penthouse suite is empty. Move in there. I can't afford. Naomi, you're a billionaire. Start acting like one. His voice was kind but firm. The Whitmores are playing hardball. You need to show them you're not afraid. Moving into the nicest hotel in the city sends a message. What message? That you belong. That you're not going anywhere. That they picked the wrong person to mess with. By noon, movers were packing up my little apartment. By 2 p.m., I was standing in a penthouse suite that was bigger than any house I'd ever lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Marble everything, furniture that probably cost more than I used to make in a year. Maya was grinning. Okay, this is insane. Mom, you have a chandelier in your bathroom. I don't belong here. Yes, you do. Catherine was your aunt. Charles was your uncle. This is your family's wealth as much as theirs. Maybe more, since you actually earned it. Anthony was setting up his laptop on the dining table. Press conference in 30 minutes. Here's what we're going to say. He walked me through it. The family connection. Catherine's letter. Charles's sound mind when he made the will. The medical documentation proving his competency. And then the bomb. The existence of documents showing the Whitmore children's criminal activities. We don't reveal what's in those documents yet, Anthony said. We just let them know we have them. Let them worry about what we might expose. Is that legal? It's strategic. They came at you in the press, accusing you of elder abuse and manipulation. We're defending you and reminding them that glass houses and stones don't mix well. The press conference was held in one of the hotel's conference rooms. Reporters packed the space, cameras everywhere. I'd never been in front of this many people in my life. Anthony spoke first, laying out the facts. The will was legal and valid. I was Charles's niece by marriage. Catherine herself had wanted me taken care of. Charles had been evaluated by multiple doctors and found competent. Then he dropped the hammer. Furthermore, we have documentation that Mr. Whitmore compiled over many years regarding his children's business activities. Activities that, if made public, would be of great interest to both the media and law enforcement. We have no desire to make this ugly. We simply want Mr. Whitmore's final wishes respected. The choice of how to proceed is entirely up to the Whitmore family. The reporters exploded with questions. Anthony answered a few, deflected others. Then he gestured to me. Ms. Brooks would like to make a brief statement. I stepped up to the microphone. Every camera in the room focused on me. For 23 years, I'd been invisible. Now, everyone was looking. My name is Naomi Brooks, I said. My voice was quiet, but the microphone picked it up. I worked for Charles and Catherine Whitmore for 23 years. I cared for Mrs. Whitmore when she was dying. I cared for Mr. Whitmore when he got sick. I never asked them for anything except a fair paycheck and respect. They gave me both. And in the end, Mr. Whitmore chose to leave me his fortune. I don't know why he trusted me over his own children, but I'm going to honor that trust. I'm going to use what he left me to do good in this world. And I'm not going to let anyone bully me into walking away from that responsibility. Short, simple, true. Anthony had wanted me to say more, but those words were all I had. The questions came fast. Did you know you were related to Mrs. Whitmore? How do you respond to allegations of manipulation? What's your relationship with the Whitmore children? Anthony fielded them all. Then we left, walking past cameras and reporters calling out questions. My phone was back on. Texts pouring in. Some supportive, some vicious. Social media was a war zone. Half the country thought I was a gold digger who'd stolen a family's inheritance. The other half thought I was a working-class hero sticking it to entitled rich people. But there were 3 texts that mattered. Victoria, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Reginald, those documents are fabricated. Our lawyers will prove it. You're finished. And one from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Brooks, this is Detective Sarah Chun with Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to speak with you about allegations raised in today's press conference. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Anthony, the police want to talk to me. He smiled.
Good. Let them.
You didn't commit any crimes. But now the police are aware that the Whitmore children might have. Let them sweat. That night, Maya and I sat in that enormous penthouse, eating takeout Chinese food on a couch that probably cost $10,000. This is surreal, Maya said. Yesterday, you were a maid. Today you're a billionaire fighting one of the most powerful families in the state. I'm terrified.
Good.
You should be. They're dangerous. She set down her food, turned serious. Mom, I need you to understand something. They're not going to stop. They're going to dig into everything. Your past, your finances, your friends, me. They're going to try to find anything they can use against you. I know. And they're going to get worse before they get better. The threats, the media attacks, all of it. Are you sure you want to do this? Because if you want to walk away, take a settlement, I'll support you. You don't owe Charles Whitmore anything.
I thought about that.
About taking some money, enough to be comfortable, and walking away from the fight. Letting the Whitmores have their empire back, their pride intact. Then I thought about Victoria's text. About being told I'd made the biggest mistake of my life by standing up for myself. About 23 years of being talked down to, dismissed, treated like I didn't matter. I'm not walking away, I said. Not from this. Then we fight. All the way. The attack came 2 days later. A woman I'd never met went on morning television claiming I'd stolen from her when we worked together at a cleaning company in 1998. Said I was a thief then, was a thief now. Had receipts, time cards, everything. Except it was all fabricated. I'd never worked at that company, never met that woman. But by the time Anthony got the records proving it was false, the damage was done. The story was everywhere. Then my old landlord from my first apartment came forward saying I'd left owing 3 months' rent and destroyed the unit. Also fake, also couldn't be disproven fast enough to stop the media cycle. They were building a narrative. Poor, desperate single mother who'd do anything for money. It was methodical, planned, effective. They're spending a fortune on this campaign, Anthony said during our daily strategy meeting. Private investigators, PR firms, paying people to lie. This is coordinated. Can we sue them? Eventually. But right now we need to focus on the Will Challenge. Court hearing is next week. They're bringing 3 doctors who'll testify that Charles couldn't have been competent. We have 4 who'll testify he was. It's going to come down to credibility. What about the documents? The evidence of their crimes? Not admissible in a Will Challenge hearing. That's for criminal court. Different jurisdiction. He paused. But I did pass copies to Detective Chen. Unofficially. And she's very interested. Particularly in Reginald's offshore accounts. That night, someone threw a brick through the hotel penthouse window. Wrapped around it was a note. Thieves don't get happy endings. Security caught nobody. The cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. Maya wanted to go to the police. I stopped her. That's what they want. They want me scared, running to authorities, looking weak. We document it and move on. Mom, they could have hurt you. But they didn't. Because they're not trying to hurt me. They're trying to scare me. I looked at the shattered glass, the brick on my marble floor. It's not working. But it was. I wasn't sleeping. Wasn't eating. Every noise made me jump. Every unknown number that called could be another threat, another lie, another attack. The court hearing was in 3 days. Anthony was confident, but I'd learned that confidence didn't always mean victory. The night before we were supposed to appear in court, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Ms. Brooks? This is Vivian Whitmore. The youngest daughter. The one who'd barely looked at me in 23 years. What do you want?
To talk. Just talk.
Can we meet? Why would I do that? Because I'm the only one in my family who thinks you might actually deserve what my father left you. And because if we go to court tomorrow, things are going to come out that will destroy what's left of my family. I want to see if there's another way. Every instinct told me it was a trap. But something in her voice sounded genuine. Desperate. Where? There's a coffee shop on 5th. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Just you and me. No lawyers, no recording devices. Just a conversation. She hung up before I could respond. Maya was shaking her head before I even said anything.
No.
Absolutely not. It's obviously a setup. Maybe. Or maybe she's legitimately trying to find a way out. You can't trust any of them. I don't. But I need to hear what she has to say. Anthony agreed with Maya. Said it was too risky, too suspicious. But I went anyway. The coffee shop was small, quiet. Vivian was already there, sitting in a corner booth. No designer clothes today. Jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked younger, without all the armor. I sat down across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. What do you want, Vivian? To apologize. And to warn you. That surprised me. Apologize for what? For 23 years of treating you like you were invisible. For never learning your daughter's name. For being exactly the kind of person my mother tried to raise me not to be. She looked down at her coffee. I found some of my mother's journals after she died. She wrote about you. About how much you reminded her of her sister. About how guilty she felt for not telling you the truth. You knew. Not until recently. My father told me, right before he died. Made me promise not to tell Victoria or Reginald. Said they'd use it against you somehow. She met my eyes. He was right. They would have. So, why are you here? Because my siblings are planning something. Tomorrow in court, they're not just going to challenge the will. They're going to produce a witness who'll claim you and my father were having an affair. That you seduced him, manipulated him, isolated him from his family. My stomach dropped. That's insane. He was my uncle. Even if I'd wanted to, which I absolutely didn't. They don't care about the truth. They care about creating enough doubt that the judge invalidates the will. And they found someone willing to lie for them. One of the overnight nurses. They're paying her $2 million to testify that she saw inappropriate behavior. Anthony will destroy her on cross-examination. Probably. But the accusation alone will be enough. The media will run with it. Your reputation will be destroyed regardless of whether it's true. She was right. An accusation like that, it didn't matter if it was proven false. The stain would remain. Why are you telling me this? Because it's wrong. My father left you that money, for a reason. And because if those documents you mentioned in the press conference are real, if they show what I think they show, then my brother and sister deserve what's coming to them. I don't. She pulled out a folder. I'm signing an affidavit stating that I believe the will is valid, that my father was competent, and that I support his decision. It won't stop Victoria and Reginald, but it might help. I looked at the document. It was exactly what she'd said. What do you want in return? Nothing. I have my own money from my gallery. I don't need my father's fortune. I just need to be able to look at myself in the mirror. She stood up. Good luck tomorrow, Ms. Brooks. I hope you win. You're more family than they ever were. She left before I could respond. I sat there with her affidavit, wondering if this was another manipulation or if Vivian Whitmore had actually grown a conscience. My phone buzzed. Text from Anthony. Just got word. They're moving the hearing up. It's today, 2 p.m. Get to the courthouse now. They were trying to catch us off guard. Probably hoping I wouldn't have time to prepare, would show up flustered and defensive. I texted back. I'll be there. And Anthony? I'm ready for war. Because that's what this was. Not a legal proceeding. Not a family dispute.
War.
And I was done being the person who backed down from a fight. The courtroom was packed. Media, observers, people who'd somehow gotten word that this hearing was going to be a spectacle. Victoria sat on one side with Reginald, both of them in expensive suits, flanked by 4 lawyers. They looked confident, entitled, like they'd already won. I sat with Anthony, wearing a simple navy dress Maya had helped me pick out. Professional but not pretentious. We were outnumbered, but Anthony seemed calm. Remember, he whispered, let me handle everything. Don't react to anything they say, no matter how outrageous. The judge entered. Honorable Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Victoria's lead attorney stood immediately. Marcus Webb, famous for winning impossible cases for powerful people. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of a vulnerable elderly man being manipulated by someone he trusted. Charles Whitmore suffered from severe dementia. He was isolated from his family by the respondent, Naomi Brooks, who used her position of power as his caretaker to unduly influence him into changing his will. We have medical experts, witnesses, and documentation that will prove Mr. Whitmore lacked the mental capacity to make such a drastic change to his estate planning. Anthony stood. Your Honor, the petitioners are asking you to overturn the explicit wishes of a man who built a $300 million empire through sharp business acumen. Mr. Whitmore was evaluated by multiple independent physicians and found completely competent at the time he executed this will. His children are simply upset that their father chose character over bloodline. We'll hear evidence from both sides, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Webb, call your first witness. Dr. Robert Hammond, neurologist who treated Charles for dementia. Webb walked him through Charles's diagnosis, the progression of his disease, his declining cognitive function. It sounded damning until Anthony cross-examined. Dr. Hammond, you evaluated Mr. Whitmore in January 2024, correct? Yes. And the will was executed in July 2024? I believe so. In your January evaluation, what was Mr. Whitmore's MMSE score? Anthony pulled out a document. That's the mini mental state examination used to assess cognitive impairment. I'd have to check my notes. Allow me. It was 26 out of 30. Anything above 24 indicates mild impairment at most. Correct. In general terms, yes, but... And you recommended he continue managing his own affairs at that time? With family oversight. But you didn't declare him incompetent?
No.
Thank you, doctor. Webb called the overnight nurse next. Rachel Morrison, a woman in her 40s who looked nervous on the stand. Ms. Morrison, you worked as Mr. Whitmore's overnight caregiver for 6 months before his death? Yes. And during that time, did you observe any inappropriate relationship between Mr. Whitmore and Ms. Brooks? My stomach clenched. Here it came. I did. Rachel's voice was quiet but clear. I saw them holding hands. I heard her tell him she loved him. I saw her in his bedroom late at night, when she shouldn't have been there. The courtroom murmured. I felt everyone's eyes on me. And did this behavior concern you? Webb asked. Very much. It seemed like she was manipulating him emotionally. Anthony stood for cross-examination. His expression hadn't changed, but I could feel the energy shift. Ms. Morrison, you were fired from your position at Whitmore Estate, weren't you? I resigned. Really? Anthony held up a document. This termination letter says you were dismissed for sleeping on duty and falsifying time cards. Which is it? Rachel's face flushed. I was let go unfairly. By whom? Ms. Brooks recommended my termination. So, you have a personal grudge against my client? No, And you've received a payment of $2 million from the Whitmore family to testify today, haven't you? The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Rachel stammered. That's not. It's compensation for lost wages. $2 million for 6 months of work comes out to over $300,000 per month. That's quite a salary for a night nurse, isn't it? Objection. Webb was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled. The witness will answer. I was compensated for the emotional distress of lying under oath? Anthony's voice was sharp. Ms. Morrison, did you actually witness any inappropriate behavior between Mr. Whitmore and Ms. Brooks, or were you paid to say you did? I saw what I saw. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence security footage from the Whitmore estate covering the 6 months Ms. Morrison claims to have witnessed this behavior. Anthony handed documents to the clerk. This footage, which the estate security system recorded continuously, shows Ms. Brooks entering Mr. Whitmore's room exactly 4 times during overnight hours in those 6 months. Each time was in response to an emergency alert from his medical monitoring system. Each visit lasted less than 20 minutes and was documented in medical logs. Ms. Morrison was not present during any of these visits, as she was typically in the staff break room, also documented by security footage. Rachel's face went white. So either the security system that's been recording continuously for 5 years suddenly malfunctioned during these alleged late-night encounters, or you're committing perjury. Which is it? I may have been mistaken about the specific details. You may have been paid to lie, you mean? Your Honor. Webb was furious. This is completely inappropriate. Mr. Webb, control your witnesses, Judge Morrison said coldly. I don't appreciate perjury in my courtroom. Ms. Morrison, you're dismissed. I'm forwarding this testimony to the district attorney for investigation. Rachel practically ran from the stand. Webb called 2 more witnesses. Charles's financial advisor, who testified that Charles had seemed confused about money in his last months. Anthony produced records showing the advisor had tried to convince Charles to invest in a scheme that would have lost millions, and Charles had refused, showing clear judgment. Then Webb called a longtime family friend who said Charles had told him he was worried about Naomi's influence. Anthony produced a recording of the same friend asking Charles for a loan of $500,000, which Charles had denied, 2 days before the friend suddenly became concerned about undue influence. By the time Webb rested his case, he'd accomplished nothing except proving the Whitmores were willing to pay people to lie. Anthony called our witnesses. 3 doctors who'd evaluated Charles in the months before his death, all confirming he'd been cognitively sound. Charles's personal attorney, who testified that Charles had been absolutely clear about his wishes and his reasons. Then Anthony did something I wasn't expecting. I'd like to call Vivian Whitmore to the stand. Victoria's head snapped around. Reginald looked shocked. Vivian stood from the back of the courtroom where she'd been sitting and walked to the witness stand. Ms. Whitmore, you're the youngest daughter of Charles Whitmore? Yes. And do you believe your father was mentally incompetent when he executed this will?
No.
He was completely clear-headed. Do you believe Naomi Brooks manipulated or unduly influenced your father?
No.
If anything, she was the only person who cared about him as a human being instead of as a bank account. Victoria whispered furiously to Webb.
He stood.
Your Honor, this witness is hostile to the petitioners. She's your client's sister, Anthony said, and she has direct knowledge of Mr. Whitmore's mental state. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Anthony continued. Ms. Whitmore, are you aware of why your father left his fortune to Naomi Brooks?
Yes.
Because she was family. Because our mother, Catherine Whitmore, was Naomi's aunt. Because Naomi took care of both our parents when we didn't. Because she deserved it more than we did. The courtroom exploded again. This was news to everyone except the people who already knew. Webb was frantically conferring with Victoria and Reginald. They clearly hadn't known Vivian was going to testify, let alone tell the truth. Ms. Whitmore, do you support this will challenge?
No.
I think my father knew exactly what he was doing. And I think my siblings are embarrassing themselves trying to overturn his wishes. Thank you. No further questions. Webb declined to cross-examine. What could he ask that wouldn't make things worse? Anthony presented Catherine's letter, the family history, the documentation of everything. Then he looked at Judge Morrison. Your Honor, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. The petitioners have accused my client of manipulation and fraud. But we have evidence that the petitioners themselves have engaged in significant financial crimes over the past decade. Embezzlement, securities fraud, money laundering. Mr. Whitmore documented it all before his death. He submitted the files. All of them. Victoria and Reginald both stood, shouting objections. Webb was trying to argue that it wasn't relevant to the will challenge. It's absolutely relevant, Anthony said calmly. It demonstrates why Mr. Whitmore chose to disinherit his children. They're criminals. He was protecting his legacy from people who'd already proven they couldn't be trusted with money. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents. Her expression grew darker with each page. These are allegations of serious crimes, she said finally. This court doesn't have jurisdiction over criminal matters. However, I am taking them into consideration as evidence of motive. Mr. Webb, does your client wish to address these accusations? Webb whispered with Victoria and Reginald. Both looked pale. No, Your Honor. We maintain these documents are irrelevant to the matter at hand. Noted. Judge Morrison closed the folder. I've heard enough. I'm ready to rule. That was fast. Anthony had said these hearings could take days. We'd been here less than 4 hours. I find that Charles Whitmore was of sound mind when he executed his will. The evidence of his competency is overwhelming and credible. The evidence of manipulation is non-existent and, in at least one case, appears to be perjured testimony purchased by the petitioners. The will is valid and will be executed as written. All assets pass to Naomi Brooks. The challenge is denied. Victoria screamed. Actual screaming in a courtroom. Security had to restrain her as she tried to lunge toward the bench. This is theft. She stole everything. You're corrupt, you're bought. Ms. Whitmore Preston, one more word, and you're in contempt. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Security, remove her from my courtroom. They dragged Victoria out, still screaming. Reginald followed, silent, but radiating fury. Vivian caught my eye as she left, nodded once, and walked out. Anthony squeezed my shoulder. It's over. You won. But I knew it wasn't over. Not even close. Outside the courtroom, reporters mobbed us. Anthony made a brief statement about justice being served. I said nothing, just let him guide me to the car. My phone was exploding. Messages, calls, social media notifications. I turned it off. What happens now? Asked when we were safely in the car. Now, the estate goes through probate. Should take a few months. The criminal evidence I submitted will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. And the Whitmores will probably appeal. Can they win an appeal? Not a chance. Judge Morrison's ruling was airtight. But they'll try anyway, just to make your life difficult. We drove back to the hotel in silence. I should have felt victorious. I'd won. The inheritance was mine. The Whitmores had been exposed. But all I felt was tired. Maya was waiting in the penthouse. She hugged me tight when I walked in. You did it, Mom. I'm so proud of you. They're going to appeal. Anthony says they won't win, but let them. You won the fight that mattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Victoria's face as security dragged her out. About Reginald's silent rage. About 23 years of working for people who'd never seen me, who now couldn't look away. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. I turned it back on to check messages from Maya. Unknown number. Text message. You think you won? This is just beginning. We'll destroy you. We'll destroy your daughter. We'll destroy everything you love. You should have taken the settlement. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Anthony and to Detective Chun. And I texted back. Bring it. Because I was done being afraid. Done being small. Done letting people like the Whitmores think they could win just because they'd always won before. They'd underestimated me for 23 years. That was their mistake. And I was going to make sure they paid for it. The attack came from a direction I never saw coming. 3 days after the court victory, Maya collapsed at work. They rushed her to the hospital. By the time I got there, she was in the ICU, unconscious. Poisoning, the doctor said. We're running tests to determine what kind. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, watching monitors beep and flash. This was my fault. I'd brought this war into our lives, and now my daughter was paying for it. Detective Chin arrived within the hour. We're treating this as attempted murder, she said quietly. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I showed her the threatening texts. All of them. Weeks' worth of escalating threats I'd been documenting but hadn't taken seriously enough. I should have protected her better. Ms. Brooks, this isn't your fault. But I need you to think. Has anyone had access to her food, her apartment, anything she might have ingested? Maya's apartment. She'd mentioned someone had delivered flowers to her office yesterday. Secret admirer, the card had said. She'd brought them home. Put them in water by her bed. Flowers, I said. Someone sent her flowers. Chin made a call. Within 20 minutes, officers were at Maya's apartment collecting the flowers, the vase, everything. The results came back that evening. Lily of the Valley. Beautiful, delicate flowers that were also highly toxic if ingested. The water in the vase had been contaminated with concentrated toxin. Maya had touched the flowers, then eaten dinner without washing her hands thoroughly. She'd been slowly poisoning herself for 2 days. She's going to recover, the doctor assured me. We caught it in time. But another day or two. They didn't have to finish. Another day, and my daughter would be dead. I called Anthony from the hospital. They tried to kill her. They actually tried to kill my daughter. Do we have proof it was the Whitmores? Who else would it be? Naomi, I need proof. Threats and suspicions aren't enough. Then get me proof. Use those investigators, those resources, whatever it takes. I want to know who sent those flowers. By morning, Maya was awake. Weak but conscious. She squeezed my hand. Mom, you look terrible. You're the one in the hospital bed. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Her voice was hoarse. Don't let them make you give up because of this. They poisoned you. Then make them pay for it. Don't back down. That's what they want. My fierce daughter. Even half dead from poison, she was ready to fight. Detective Chun came by with news. The flowers had been ordered through an anonymous online service, paid for with cryptocurrency. Untraceable. Delivered by a third-party courier who'd been given the package and a cash tip by someone they couldn't identify. Dead end. But Chun wasn't giving up. We're pulling security footage from every camera within 3 blocks of the courier pickup location.
Someone ordered this.
We'll find them. I stayed with Maya for 2 days. Slept in the chair by her bed, left only to shower and change clothes. Anthony brought work to the hospital. The estate was processing, assets being transferred, legal documents requiring signatures. You're now officially worth $300 million, he said, handing me papers to sign. How does it feel? Like nothing. Money doesn't matter when your daughter almost dies. Money matters when you use it right. He pulled out another folder. I've been thinking about what Charles wanted. The instructions he left in the safe deposit box about what to do with the fortune.
I'd almost forgotten about that.
There'd been a second letter, one I'd been too overwhelmed to fully process. What did it say? He wanted you to dismantle the parts of his empire built on exploitation. The real estate holdings that displaced poor families. The investment portfolios that funded private prisons. The offshore accounts that avoided paying fair taxes. He wanted you to turn his wealth into something that actually helped people instead of hurting them. That's a lot to ask of someone who was cleaning toilets 3 weeks ago. That's exactly why he asked you. Because you know what it's like to be on the other side of wealth. You know who gets hurt when rich people play games with money. A nurse came in to check Maya's vitals. We paused the conversation until she left.
I don't know how to do any of that, I admitted.
You hire people who do. Accountants, lawyers, advisors who share your values. You build a team. Charles left recommendations, people he trusted who weren't corrupt. Anthony hesitated. There's something else. The criminal investigation into Victoria and Reginald is moving forward. The DA wants to bring charges.
Good.
It's going to get uglier. They'll claim you fabricated the evidence. They'll attack harder than ever. Let them. They tried to kill my daughter. I'm done caring about how ugly this gets. Maya was released from the hospital 4 days later. We moved her into the penthouse with me, hired private security, installed cameras. I wasn't taking any more chances. The story of her poisoning leaked to the press. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Before, I'd been a controversial figure, half the country on each side. Now, threatening a woman's daughter crossed a line.
Support flooded in. But so did the attacks.
Someone released my financial records from 20 years ago. Times I'd been late on rent, utilities shut off, a car repossessed. They were trying to paint me as irresponsible with money, unfit to manage a fortune. It backfired. People saw a single mother struggling to survive and working 3 jobs. It made me more sympathetic, not less. Then they found my DUI from 2003. I'd been driving home from a work Christmas party, had 2 glasses of wine, got pulled over. It was stupid and I'd paid the fine, done the community service, never repeated the mistake. The headline, Billionaire Heiress's Criminal Past Exposed. I laughed when I saw it. That was their smoking gun? A DUI from 20 years ago? But Victoria wasn't done. She went on national television, on one of those morning talk shows, crying about how I'd stolen her family's legacy. My father built that empire from nothing, she said, dabbing at her eyes. He wanted his children to carry on his work. Instead, this woman manipulated him, isolated him from his family, and convinced him to leave everything to her. My father would be horrified if he could see what she's doing with his life's work. The host, sympathetic, asked what I was doing that was so horrible. She's dismantling everything. Selling off properties, liquidating investments, destroying what my father spent 50 years building. What she didn't mention was that the properties I was selling were slum apartments charging outrageous rent to poor families. That the investments I was liquidating were in companies using prison labor. That I was destroying the parts of Charles's empire he'd been most ashamed of. Anthony arranged for me to appear on the same show the next day. I'm honored to carry out Charles Whitmore's final wishes, I told the host. He left very specific instructions about what he wanted done with his fortune. He wanted to right the wrongs he'd committed in building it. He wanted to help the communities he'd hurt. That's exactly what I'm doing. But his children say. His children are currently under investigation for embezzlement, securities fraud, and money laundering. Perhaps we should ask why Charles chose someone else to manage his legacy instead of trusting them with it. That soundbite went viral. The internet loved it. But at home, Maya was getting worse, not better. The physical effects of the poisoning were fading, but the psychological trauma was crushing her. I don't feel safe anywhere, she admitted one night. Every time I eat something, I wonder if it's poisoned. Every package delivered. Every stranger on the street. How do you live like this? We hire more security. We're more careful. Mom, I can't live in a prison. That's what this is. We're prisoners in this beautiful penthouse, afraid to leave, afraid to trust anyone. She was right. I'd won the legal battle, but we were losing the war for our lives. That's when Detective Chun called with news. We found something. Security footage from near the courier pickup location. A car registered to Reginald Whitmore's personal assistant dropping off a package matching the description of what the courier received. You can arrest him? We can bring him in for questioning. The assistant is claiming she was running an errand, didn't know what was in the package. It's circumstantial, but it's a link. What about Victoria? Still investigating. But Naomi, there's something else. The financial crimes case against Reginald is solid. We have enough to charge him with embezzlement and wire fraud. That's 20 years minimum if convicted. Do it. Once we arrest him, there's no going back. This becomes a criminal matter. The media will be relentless. His lawyers will come after you harder than ever. They already tried to kill my daughter. How much worse can it get? I found out the next day. Reginald was arrested at his office. Perp walked past cameras in handcuffs. The charges: 12 counts of embezzlement, 8 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of tax evasion. His lawyer immediately blamed me. These charges are retaliation for my client's legitimate legal challenge to a fraudulent will. Ms. Brooks has used her ill-gotten fortune to weaponize law enforcement against the Whitmore family. It was absurd. The evidence had come from Charles himself, documented years before his death. But the narrative stuck with some people. Then Victoria held a press conference with her own bombshell. I have proof that Naomi Brooks is not who she claims to be. Proof that her entire relationship with my family was built on deception. She held up documents. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates. Naomi Brooks claims to be the daughter of Grace Brooks, my mother's sister. But Grace Brooks never had a daughter. These records show that Grace died childless in 1998. Naomi Brooks stole a dead woman's identity to infiltrate our family. The reporters erupted with questions. My phone started ringing immediately. Maya looked at me confused. Mom, what is she talking about? I don't know. That's insane. Your grandmother is buried in. Actually, Anthony's voice came from the doorway. He'd let himself in with his key, was standing there with an expression I couldn't read. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. Anthony, what's going on? He came in, closed the door, set his briefcase down with the careful movements of someone about to deliver devastating news. I did a deep background check when this case started. Standard procedure. And I found some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The woman you knew as your mother, the woman who raised you, her name was Grace Brooks. But she wasn't Catherine Whitmore's sister. The real Grace Brooks, Catherine's sister, died in 1975 of a drug overdose. Your mother took her identity sometime in the late 70s. The room spun. That's impossible. I have the death certificate. The real Grace Brooks is buried in South Carolina. I've been sitting on this information because I didn't know what it meant, whether it mattered. Now Victoria's found it too. Maya grabbed my hand. Mom, who is Grandma really? I don't know. She never talked about her past. She said her family was dead, that it was just us. Did she ever mention Catherine? Ever talk about having a sister? I thought back through 30 years of memories. My mother had been closed off about her past, had always deflected questions. I'd assumed it was because of pain, loss. Now I wondered if it was because she'd been hiding something.
No.
Never. Anthony pulled out more documents. Charles knew. He found out about a year before he died. That's in the safe deposit box too, in a sealed envelope I wasn't supposed to open unless this came up. He hired investigators. They found the truth. What truth? Your mother was a woman named Ruth Johnson. She worked as a maid for Catherine's family in South Carolina in the early 70s. When the real Grace died, Ruth took her identity and disappeared. Charles's investigators couldn't find out why. But they did find out that you're actually Ruth's daughter, not Grace's. Which means you're not related to Catherine at all. The floor dropped out from under me. Everything I'd believed about the inheritance, about why Charles had left me his fortune, about my connection to this family, all of it was based on a lie. So Victoria's right, I whispered. I'm not family. I'm nobody. I don't deserve any of this. That's not what Charles thought, Anthony said quickly. Look, there's a letter. He wrote it after he found out. He specifically said it didn't change anything, that you'd earned his trust and his fortune regardless of blood relation. He handed me an envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Naomi, if you're reading this, you know the truth about your mother. I wish I could tell you why Ruth became Grace, what she was running from, but I couldn't find out. What I do know is this. It doesn't matter. You are the person Catherine loved like family. You are the person who showed me kindness when everyone else wanted my money. Blood doesn't make you worthy. Character does. Don't let anyone use this information to make you doubt your value or your right to what I've left you. You earned it. Charles, I read it 3 times. Then I looked at Anthony. Does this change anything legally?
No.
The will doesn't specify that you inherit because you're family. It specifies that you inherit because Charles chose you. Victoria finding this information doesn't invalidate anything. But publicly, it's going to be a disaster. They're going to say you committed fraud, that you knew all along you weren't related, that you tricked Charles. It's going to be ugly. Maya was crying. Grandma lied to us. Our whole lives, she lied. Or she was protecting us from something, I said. We don't know why she took that identity. Maybe she had a good reason. Or maybe she was a con artist, and you're following in her footsteps, Maya said bitterly. That's what they're going to say. She wasn't wrong. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Fake heiress exposed. Naomi Brooks's identity fraud revealed. Victoria was on every news channel, calling for criminal charges against me for fraud and identity theft. The DA's office released a statement that they were reviewing the situation. My supporters started wavering. Even people who'd been on my side were questioning whether I'd knowingly perpetrated a fraud. I sat in the penthouse that night, looking out at the city lights, holding my grandmother's necklace. Except she wasn't my grandmother. Catherine wasn't my aunt. I had no connection to any of this except that a billionaire had decided to leave me his money for reasons I no longer understood. Maybe I should give it back, I said to Maya. Don't you dare. She was still angry, but her voice was firm. Grandma might have lied about who she was, but that doesn't make you a fraud. You didn't know. And Mr. Whitmore left you that money knowing the truth. His decision stands. The public doesn't see it that way. Since when do you care what the public thinks? Since they tried to kill you, I wanted to say. Since I realized fighting these people puts everyone I love in danger. But before I could answer, my phone rang. Detective Chun. Ms. Brooks, I need you to come to the station. Why? The DA wants to question you about potential identity fraud related to your mother's stolen identity. You're not under arrest, but I'd strongly advise you to bring your lawyer. Am I being charged with something? Not yet. But Victoria Whitmore has filed a formal complaint. We have to investigate. I hung up and looked at Maya. They're not just trying to take the money anymore. They're trying to put me in prison. The interrogation room was exactly like you see on television. Gray walls, metal table, mirror that was obviously one-way glass. I sat with Anthony beside me, trying not to look as terrified as I felt. Detective Chun came in with a DA investigator named James Park. "Ms. Brooks, you understand you're not under arrest," Park said. "But we need to ask you some questions about your mother's identity and whether you knowingly benefited from identity fraud." "My client had no knowledge of her mother's true identity until 3 days ago," Anthony said immediately. "Let's establish some facts. Your mother died in 2002. Yes. And you've been using the name Naomi Brooks your entire life?" "It's the only name I've ever known. It's on my birth certificate, my social security card, everything. Except your birth certificate is in the name of a woman who died 3 years before you were born." Park slid a document across the table. "Grace Brooks died in 1975. This birth certificate claiming Grace Brooks gave birth to you in 1972 is fraudulent." My hands went cold. "I didn't know that." "Your mother never told you she'd stolen someone's identity?"
No.
"She never talked about her past. I thought she was just private about it." "Convenient." "Detective Park," Anthony cut in. "Unless you have evidence that my client knew about this fraud, you're wasting everyone's time. She's a victim here, not a perpetrator." "Is she?" "Because it seems pretty convenient that she ends up working for the family of the woman whose identity her mother stole. That she befriends Catherine Whitmore, gets written into the will as a niece, inherits $300 million based on a family connection that doesn't exist." "Charles Whitmore knew the truth," I said. "He found out and he left me the money, anyway. It's in his letter." "We've read the letter. It doesn't prove you didn't know before he did."
Chun spoke up for the first time.
"Ms. Brooks, help me understand the timeline. You started working for the Whitmores in 2001. Your mother died in 2002. Did she ever mention Catherine or Charles before she died?" I thought back. When I told her I got the job, she seemed surprised. Asked me what the family name was. I said Whitmore. She went quiet. "Did she tell you to quit?"
No.
"She said to do my work and not expect anything from people like that." "People like what?" I thought she meant rich people. But now, maybe she meant something else. Park leaned forward. "Maybe she meant the family she'd been running from for 30 years? I don't know what she meant. She died 3 months later. We never talked about it again. And you never wondered why Catherine Whitmore seemed to pay special attention to you? Never questioned why you were treated differently than the other staff?" "I wasn't treated differently. I was treated like the help for 23 years. Until suddenly you inherited everything." Anthony slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You're fishing. You have no evidence of fraud on my client's part because there isn't any. A woman who's been dead for 22 years stole an identity. That's not Naomi's crime." Park sat back. "Maybe not. But it does invalidate the family connection that Catherine's letter referenced. It proves Ms. Brooks had no legal right to claim kinship with the Whitmores." "She never claimed kinship," Anthony shot back. "Catherine and Charles claimed kinship with her. There's a difference." Chun looked uncomfortable. "There's another issue. Victoria Whitmore is claiming that your mother deliberately targeted her family. That Ruth Johnson worked for Catherine's family, learned about Grace's death, stole her identity, and spent decades planning to infiltrate the Whitmore family and steal their fortune. That's insane. My mother died in 2002. Charles didn't change his will until 2024. But you were already in the house. Already in position. I was a maid. I didn't ask Charles to leave me anything. I didn't even know about the family connection until after he died." "Can you prove that?" The question hung in the air. "How do you prove you didn't know something?" "The burden of proof is on you," Anthony said. "Innocent until proven guilty. Show me evidence that Naomi knew, or we're done here." They didn't have any. After another 20 minutes of circular questions, they let us leave. Outside the police station, reporters were waiting. Someone had tipped them off. "Ms. Brooks, did you know your mother was a fraud? Are you dropping your claim to the Whitmore fortune? Should you be in prison instead of living in a penthouse?" Anthony shielded me into the car. We drove away in silence. "How bad is this?" I finally asked. "Legally? You're probably fine. They don't have evidence you committed a crime. But publicly, it's devastating. The story is everywhere. Even your supporters are questioning you now. He was right. My phone was full of messages. Some supportive, but most were people distancing themselves. Organizations that had reached out about partnerships, suddenly unavailable. Charities that had been excited about donations, now concerned about their reputations. I'd gone from sympathetic victim to suspected con artist overnight. When we got back to the penthouse, Maya was watching the news. Every channel was covering the story. DNA test proves Naomi Brooks is not related to Whitmore family. They'd gotten my DNA somehow. Probably from a coffee cup I'd thrown away or a hairbrush from my old apartment. Compared it to Catherine's DNA from medical records. No match. Mom, they're destroying you, Maya said. I know. What are we going to do? Before I could answer, the hotel manager called up. Miss Brooks, I'm sorry, but we need to ask you to leave. The hotel's reputation is being affected by your presence. We'll refund your charges, but you need to vacate by end of day. I own this hotel, I said. Technically, the estate owns it, and until probate is complete, the temporary management board has authority over operational decisions. I'm sorry. They were kicking me out of a hotel I owned. Anthony started making calls. I'll get an injunction. They can't do this. But more calls were coming in. The bank had frozen my accounts pending investigation into the fraud allegations. The estate probate had been suspended. The board of Charles's foundation had voted to distance themselves from me. In one day, I'd lost access to everything. We need somewhere to stay, Maya said practically. Do you have any money? My old savings account. Maybe $5,000 that's in my original name. That's it. Everything else is tied up in the estate. We packed quickly. I didn't want to take anything from the penthouse, didn't want them claiming I'd stolen property. Just our clothes and personal items. Maya's friend offered us her couch in a studio apartment across town. It was humiliating, going from a penthouse to a couch, but we didn't have a choice. That night, sleeping on an air mattress on a stranger's floor, I finally broke down. Maya held me while I cried. I should have walked away, I sobbed. Should have taken a settlement, stayed invisible. Now I've lost everything and dragged you down with me. You haven't lost. You've just hit a rough patch. Maya, they've taken everything. The money, the reputation, the support. Even if I win legally, I've lost in every way that matters. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I almost didn't look, but I did. A photo. Of my mother. Young, maybe 20 years old, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. Behind them was a sign. Johnson Family Farm, 1971. And a message. Your mother didn't steal Grace's identity to con anyone. She stole it to survive. Want to know the truth? Meet me tomorrow. Alone. An address followed. A diner on the outskirts of town. It's a trap, Maya said when I showed her. Maybe. Or maybe it's the truth. You can't go alone. That's what they said. Then don't go at all. It's too dangerous. But I had to know. I'd lost everything based on a lie my mother had told. If there was a chance to understand why, I needed to take it. The next morning, I went to the diner alone. Anthony didn't know. Maya didn't approve but couldn't stop me. The diner was half empty. I sat in a booth by the window and waited. An older black woman walked in 20 minutes later. 70, maybe 75, with kind eyes and hands that showed a lifetime of hard work. She slid into the booth across from me. You look just like Ruth, she said. I'm Sarah, your mother's sister. My mother didn't have a sister. Ruth did. Grace didn't. She smiled sadly. Your mother never told you about us, did she? She never told me anything. Sarah ordered coffee, took her time adding cream and sugar. Then she started talking. Ruth and I grew up on a farm in Alabama. Sharecroppers, barely scraping by. Our daddy was a mean drunk. Beat our mama, beat us. When Ruth was 17, she met a boy from town. Got pregnant. Your father. Who was he? Doesn't matter. He died in Vietnam before you were born. But when Daddy found out Ruth was pregnant, he tried to kill her. Literally. Beat her so bad, she lost hearing in one ear. I touched my left ear unconsciously. My mother had been partially deaf on that side. Car accident, she'd always said. Ruth ran. Went to South Carolina, got a job working for a rich, white family. That's where she met Catherine and Grace. Grace was sick, cancer, and when she died, Ruth saw an opportunity. She took Grace's identity and disappeared. Changed her whole life. To hide from our father? To hide from everyone. Daddy had connections, people who'd look for her. But Grace Brooks? Nobody was looking for Grace Brooks. She was already dead. Why didn't she tell me? Because she was protecting you. As long as you thought she was Grace, you were safe. But if you knew she was Ruth, if you knew about the family she came from, you might have gone looking. And that man, your grandfather, he never stopped being dangerous. Is he still alive? Died 5 years ago. Mean to the end. But Ruth didn't know that. She spent her whole life afraid he'd find her, find you. That's why she kept moving, kept her head down, never talked about the past. I was crying. For my mother, for the life she'd had to hide from, for the fear she'd carried alone. Did Catherine know? Not at first. But near the end, when she was dying, Ruth visited her. Told her the truth. Catherine was the one who got Ruth the job at the Whitmore estate. Told Charles to take care of you. It was her way of making amends for the family Ruth had worked for, the family that never protected her from what happened. So, I'm not related to Catherine at all. Not by blood. But family isn't just blood, child. Catherine loved your mama like a sister. And she loved you like a niece. That's what mattered to her. Sarah handed me an envelope. Old, yellowed with age. Ruth left this with me before she died. Said if you ever found out the truth, you should have it. Inside was a letter in my mother's handwriting. Naomi, if you're reading this, you know who I really was. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about your father, about my family, about why we were always running. I did it to keep you safe. Everything I did was to give you a better life than I had. I hope you understand. I hope you can forgive me. You deserved better than a mother who was always afraid. But you were loved. Every single day of your life, you were so loved. Mama. I couldn't stop crying. Sarah reached across the table, held my hand. Your mother would be so proud of you. Standing up to those rich folks, fighting for what's right. She never could do that. Spent her whole life bowing her head, staying small. But you? You're stronger than she ever was. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm losing everything. You are. That's what happens when you fight people with power. They take everything they can. But they can't take who you are. They can't take what you know is right. We talked for another hour. She told me about my mother's childhood, about the family I'd never known, about a history that had been hidden to keep me safe. When I left that diner, I didn't have any more money. Didn't have any more power. Didn't have any way to fight back against the Whitmores. But I had the truth. And sometimes, that's all you need. I went back to Maya's friend's apartment and told her everything. Then I called Anthony. I know what I need to do, I said. What's that? Stop fighting their way. Stop playing their game. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. My mother's story, my story, why Charles really left me that money. I'm going to stop defending myself and start showing them who I really am. That's risky. It could backfire. It already has. I've got nothing left to lose. When do you want to do this? Tomorrow. Set up a press conference. I'm done hiding. That night, I wrote out everything I wanted to say. Maya helped me practice. We stayed up until 3 a.m., getting it right. The next morning, Anthony had arranged a press conference at a community center in the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Not a fancy hotel or law office. A place that meant something. Reporters packed the room. I stood at the podium, looking at all those cameras, and took a deep breath. My name is Naomi Brooks. My mother's name was Ruth Johnson, and she stole a dead woman's identity to escape from an abusive father who tried to kill her. I didn't know that until a week ago. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie designed to protect me. I told them everything. About Ruth's life, about Catherine's kindness, about Charles's decision to leave me his fortune, knowing I wasn't blood family. The Whitmores want you to think I'm a con artist who stole their inheritance.
But the truth is simpler than that.
I'm a woman who worked hard for 23 years, who cared for dying people when their own children wouldn't, who earned the trust of a man who had every reason to be suspicious of everyone around him. Charles Whitmore left me his fortune not because of who my mother was, but because of who I am. And I'm going to use that fortune exactly the way he wanted, to help people the system has failed. People like my mother. People like me. I finished and walked away from the podium. Didn't take questions. Didn't wait for reactions. Just left. The response was immediate and divided. Half the country thought I was brave. The other half thought I was a liar. But something shifted. The narrative changed from fraud to survival. People started asking why a woman had to steal an identity to escape abuse. Why the system had failed her so completely. Then Detective Chun called with news that changed everything. We arrested Victoria Whitmore an hour ago for conspiracy to commit murder in your daughter's poisoning. Her assistant flipped, gave us everything. Victoria ordered the flowers, paid for them in cash through her assistant, thought she'd covered her tracks. She didn't. What about Reginald? Still facing embezzlement charges. Trial starts in 2 months. And the estate? Probate judge reviewed everything this morning. The freeze is lifted. The will stands.
It's yours, Naomi.
All of it. I hung up and looked at Maya. We won, I whispered.
No, she said.
You survived. Now comes the hard part, actually doing something with it. She was right. Winning was one thing. Changing the world was another. Victoria stayed missing for 6 days. 6 days of living in the safe house, jumping at every sound, wondering if today would be the day she made good on her threat. 6 days of police protection and security briefings and constant fear. Then Detective Chin called with news. We found her. She's holed up in one of the old Whitmore properties, a warehouse that's supposed to be condemned. SWAT's getting ready to move in. Is she alone? We don't know. Thermal imaging shows at least 1 heat signature, possibly 2. Naomi, I need to ask you something, and you're going to think I'm crazy.
What?
Would you be willing to talk to her? We've tried negotiating, but she won't speak to anyone. She specifically asked for you. Absolutely not, Anthony said. He'd been at the safe house when the call came. That's exactly what she wants. She gets Naomi close. She finishes what she started. But something in Chen's voice made me pause. What aren't you telling me? She says she has information. About Charles, about the inheritance, about why he really left you the money. Says if she's going to prison for life, she wants the truth out first. She's lying. Maybe. But what if she's not? What if there's something in Charles's past that changes everything? I thought about all the secrets that had already come out. My mother's stolen identity. The family connection that wasn't. The criminal activity Charles had documented, but never prosecuted. What else could there be? I'll do it, I said. But I want it recorded. Everything she says, I want evidence. Naomi, no. Maya grabbed my arm. This is insane. She tried to kill me. Now you're going to walk into a warehouse with her? With SWAT outside and police protection. She can't hurt me. She already has. Maya was right, but I needed to know. Needed to understand what was still hidden. 2 hours later, I was wearing a wire and a bulletproof vest, standing outside a warehouse in the industrial district. SWAT surrounded the building. Chun was beside me, along with 4 armed officers. She's on the 2nd floor, Chun said. We've cleared the ground level. You go up, you talk, you come back down. 15 minutes maximum. If anything feels wrong, you say, I'm done, and we pull you out immediately. Got it. And Naomi? Don't believe everything she says. Victoria's desperate. Desperate people lie. I walked into the warehouse. It was dark, dusty, clearly abandoned for years. The stairs to the 2nd floor creaked under my feet. Victoria was sitting in the middle of an empty room, surrounded by boxes and old furniture. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, eyes wild. You came, she said. You asked for me. I wasn't sure you'd be stupid enough. What do you want, Victoria? She laughed. It sounded unhinged. What do I want? I want my life back. I want my father back. I want everything you stole from me. I didn't steal anything. Charles chose. Don't. Her voice went hard. Don't give me that line about how my father chose you, because you were kind to him. That's not why he left you everything. Then why? Because you're his daughter. The room spun. What? Oh, your mother didn't tell you that either? Ruth and Charles had an affair in the early 70s when she was working for Catherine's family. You're not just some random maid he felt sorry for. You're his illegitimate child. That's a lie. Is it? Did you ever wonder why your mother ran? Why she stole Grace's identity and disappeared? She was pregnant with Charles Whitmore's baby. With you. My father died in Vietnam. Sarah told me. Sarah told you what Ruth wanted her to believe. But I found the truth. I hired investigators after the will was read, trying to find dirt on you. Instead, I found this. She pulled out a folder, threw it across the floor. I picked it up with shaking hands. Inside were DNA test results, comparing my DNA to Charles Whitmore's. 99.9% probability of paternal relationship. No, I whispered.
Yes.
My father had an affair with a maid, got her pregnant, sent her away with money to keep quiet, then forgot all about her until she showed up working in his house 30 years later. He would have told me, would he? The man who kept secrets about everything? Who documented his children's crimes but never confronted us? Who lived his whole life controlling information? Victoria stood up, walked closer. He knew who you were the moment you walked through that door. That's why he hired you. That's why my mother paid special attention to you. They both knew. Catherine knew? Of course she knew. Why do you think she hired you? She was dying and she wanted to make sure her husband took care of the daughter he'd abandoned. It was her final act of mercy, forcing him to face what he'd done. I was going to be sick. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed about why I mattered to them, it was all based on another lie. I don't believe you. Then explain the DNA test. Explain why he left everything to you instead of his legitimate children. Explain why he made you his caretaker, why he trusted you over us. Because I earned it. Victoria laughed again. You're adorable. You really think this was about merit? About kindness? No, sweetheart. This was guilt. Charles Whitmore spent 50 years feeling guilty about abandoning his illegitimate black daughter to poverty, while his legitimate white children lived in mansions. The will was his apology, his way of balancing the scales. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. The will is valid. But it changes everything about who you are. You're not some virtuous maid who rose above her station. You're just another Whitmore. Just as entitled to the money as the rest of us. How does that feel? It felt like drowning. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that you're no better than me. You inherited money from your father just like I did. The only difference is you get to pretend you earned it while I'm honest about being born into it. I didn't know. And that makes it better? Your ignorance makes you noble? Victoria pulled something from her pocket. A gun. Chen's voice crackled in my earpiece. Weapon spotted. Get out.
Now.
I'm done, I said, the code phrase. Not yet. Victoria aimed the gun at me. First, you're going to renounce the inheritance. All of it. Sign it over to me and Reginald and Vivian. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. The will is executed. The assets are already transferred. Then transfer them back. Victoria, think about what you're doing. You shoot me, you'll never get out of here. SWAT has the building surrounded. I know. I'm not getting out of here, either way. 75 years in prison? I'd rather die. But I'm taking you with me. She was serious. I could see it in her eyes. Your father wouldn't want this. My father is dead. And he obviously didn't want me to have anything, so why should I care what he wanted? He wanted you to be better than this. That's why he documented your crimes but never turned you in. He was hoping you'd change. Well, I didn't. None of us did. We're exactly what he made us. Entitled, ruthless, willing to do anything to keep what's ours. I'm not yours. But the money should be. The door behind me burst open.
SWAT moving fast.
Victoria swung the gun toward them. Everything happened at once. Gunshots. Someone tackled me to the ground. More shots.
Shouting.
Then silence. I looked up. Victoria was on the ground, blood spreading across her chest. 2 SWAT officers had fired. She wasn't moving. Chun pulled me up, checked me over. Are you hit?
No.
No, I'm fine. We got out of the building. Paramedics were already working on Victoria, but I could see from their faces it was too late. She died en route to the hospital. The investigation cleared the officers immediately. Victoria had aimed a loaded weapon at law enforcement. They'd had no choice. But that didn't make it easier. I sat in Chen's office hours later, still wearing the bulletproof vest, still shaking. The DNA test, I said. Was it real? Chun had retrieved the folder. She handed it to Anthony, who'd been reviewing it with a forensic expert. It's real, he said quietly. Charles Whitmore was your biological father. Did he know? According to his personal files, yes. He found out when he hired investigators after your mother died. That's when he started planning the will. So it was true. All of it. I wasn't just a maid who'd gotten lucky. I was Charles Whitmore's daughter. His abandoned, illegitimate, half-black daughter that he'd spent 30 years pretending didn't exist. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know, Anthony said. Maybe guilt. Maybe shame. Maybe he thought it would be easier for you if you didn't know. Easier? Finding out I'm related to a man I cared for, that he was my father and never claimed me. That's supposed to be easier?
No.
It's supposed to be complicated. Which is what the truth usually is. Maya had been waiting outside. She came in now, sat beside me. Mom, I heard. Are you okay? I don't know. I don't know who I am anymore. You're the same person you were yesterday. The same person who raised me alone, who worked 3 jobs, who fought for what was right. Biology doesn't change that.
But it did change something.
It changed the story. Changed the meaning. I hadn't inherited $300 million because I'd earned it through kindness and hard work. I'd inherited it because my father had abandoned me and felt guilty. The headlines the next day were brutal. Billionaire's secret black daughter inherits fortune. DNA proves Naomi Brooks is Charles Whitmore's child. Whitmore's illegitimate daughter revealed. Some people were sympathetic. Others said I'd known all along that the virtuous Maid story had been a con from the start. I stopped reading after a while. A week later, Reginald's lawyer contacted Anthony. Reginald wanted to meet. We met at his lawyer's office. He looked terrible. Thin, pale, defeated. Victoria's dead because of you, he said. Victoria's dead because she pulled a gun on police. She wouldn't have done that if you hadn't pushed her. If you'd just walked away. Your sister tried to murder my daughter. I'm not going to apologize for pursuing justice. Justice? You're Charles Whitmore's daughter. You got exactly what you deserved. You just didn't want to share. Is that what you think? That I knew who I was and manipulated all of this? Didn't you? I found out the same time you did. I spent my whole life not knowing why my father abandoned me. Now I know, and it doesn't make it hurt any less. Reginald was quiet. Then, he wasn't a good father to any of us.
No.
He wasn't. I'm taking the plea deal. 5 years. I'll be out in 3 with good behavior.
Good.
And I'm not fighting the will anymore. The estate is yours. Do whatever you want with it. Why the change? Because I'm tired. Tired of fighting, tired of losing, tired of being the villain. Maybe Victoria had the right idea. Maybe it's better to just end it. Don't talk like that. Why not? My life is over. My reputation is destroyed. I'm going to prison. My sister is dead. What's left? The chance to do better. To be better than what your father made you. I'm 46 years old. I'm not changing now. He left. I never saw him again. That night, alone in a hotel room, I finally read all of Charles's letters. The ones he'd left explaining everything. He'd known who I was from the moment I interviewed for the job. Had hired me because Catherine was dying and had begged him to take care of his daughter. Had watched me for years, wondering if I'd turn out like his legitimate children or if I'd be something better. "You're better, Naomi," he wrote. "You're the person I should have raised. The daughter I should have claimed. I was a coward. I chose my reputation over your well-being. I chose Catherine's feelings over your right to know your father. I chose comfort over truth.
I'm sorry.
This inheritance doesn't make up for 30 years of abandonment. Nothing could. But it's what I have to give.
Use it better than I did.
Be better than I was. Make the Whitmore name mean something good for once. Your father, Charles." I cried for hours. For the father I'd never known. For the life I could have had. For the man who'd been too afraid to claim his own daughter. But somewhere in that grief, something else emerged.
Clarity.
Charles had been right about one thing. I was better than what he'd been. Better than what he'd made his other children. And I was going to prove it. 6 months later, I stood in front of a building I'd purchased and renovated in the neighborhood where my mother and I had struggled for so many years. The sign above the door read, "Ruth's Place, Haven for New Beginnings." Inside were 30 apartments for domestic violence survivors. Free housing for up to 2 years, plus childcare, job training, legal services, and counseling. Everything my mother had needed and never received. Maya stood beside me as we cut the ribbon. Reporters were there, but this time the coverage was different. Naomi Brooks opens shelter named for mother. Whitmore fortune transformed into community resource. From maid to philanthropist. The Naomi Brooks story. Patricia, my housing director, gave me a tour of the completed facility. Women and children were already moving in. I watched a mother about my age carrying her daughter's belongings into a one-bedroom apartment, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered as she passed me. "You don't know what this means." But I did know. I knew exactly what it meant. Over the following months, the Ruth Brooks Foundation grew. We opened 3 more shelters. We funded legal defense clinics in low-income neighborhoods. We converted 12 of Charles's old properties into truly affordable housing, where rent was based on income and support services were built in. Marcus launched our criminal justice reform initiative, funding public defenders and bail assistance programs. We partnered with organizations fighting mass incarceration, supporting legislation, helping families stay together when loved ones were locked up. Dr. Chun built our family services program, providing resources for foster children aging out of the system, for grandparents raising grandchildren, for families struggling with addiction and mental health. The foundation spent $60 million in that first year. Some financial advisors were horrified. "You're depleting the principal," they warned. "At this rate, the money will be gone in 5 years." "Good," I said. "That means we're actually using it." Anthony helped me restructure everything. We sold off the investments in private prisons and predatory lending companies. We divested from fossil fuels and weapons manufacturers. We put the money into community development, renewable energy, small business loans in underserved neighborhoods. The estate's value dropped from $300 million to $180 million. I slept better than I had in years. Reginald went to prison as scheduled. I visited him once, 3 months into his sentence. He looked different. Humbled, maybe. Or just broken. "Why did you come?" he asked. "Because you're my half-brother. Like it or not, we're family. I tried to destroy you." "Yes. And you failed. But that doesn't mean I want you to suffer forever." "The money's really gone? You actually spent it on poor people." "I'm using it the way it should have been used from the beginning. To help instead of hurt." He shook his head. Charles would be proud. He always hated what he'd built, even while he kept building it. He was a complicated man. He was a coward who abandoned his daughter and died before he could make it right. Yes, he was that too. We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm sorry," Reginald said finally. "About Maya. About everything. I was raised to believe I was entitled to everything and responsible for nothing. That's not an excuse, just an explanation." "I know. Will you tell her?" "That I'm sorry." "I will." I left the prison feeling lighter somehow. Forgiveness didn't erase what he'd done, but it freed me from carrying the weight of his sins. Maya graduated with her master's degree in social work that spring. She joined the foundation full-time, running our youth programs. "I want to help kids like I was," she said. "Growing up poor, watching their parents struggle, wondering if they'll ever have stability. I want them to know there's a way out." She was brilliant at it. Natural, compassionate, effective. Watching her work, I realized the best thing Charles's money had given me wasn't security or comfort. It was the ability to let my daughter pursue purpose instead of just survival. Vivian reached out a year after Victoria's death. We met for coffee, awkward at first. "I'm selling the gallery," she said. "Starting over. Maybe doing something that actually matters." "What are you thinking?" "Art therapy programs. For kids in foster care, juvenile detention, places like that. I was looking at your foundation's work and thought maybe we could partner." "I'd like that." "Really? After everything my family did to you?" "You're not responsible for Victoria's choices or Reginald's. You stood up when it mattered. That counts for something." We launched the partnership 6 months later. Art therapy in 10 facilities, taught by professional artists, but funded by the foundation. Kids creating beauty in places designed to warehouse them. Vivian found her calling. She'd call me sometimes, excited about a breakthrough with a troubled teen or a particularly moving piece of artwork. "I think this is what I was supposed to do all along," she said once. "Not sell expensive paintings to rich people. Actually use art to heal." Better late than never. You don't hate me? For taking so long to be decent. I don't hate any of you. I just wish you'd figured it out before Victoria destroyed herself trying to destroy me. Me too. 2 years after Charles's death, the remaining Whitmore children, his legitimate ones, had scattered. Reginald in prison, finding something resembling peace. Vivian running art programs, rebuilding her life. Victoria buried beside her father, a cautionary tale about what happens when entitlement meets desperation. And me? I was living in a modest house in the neighborhood where I'd grown up. Not the penthouse, not a mansion. A 3-bedroom house with a small yard and neighbors who'd known me before I was rich. Maya lived 2 blocks away with her girlfriend, building a life that looked nothing like the one she'd grown up in. I still had money. Still had resources. Still had the ability to do good. But I also had something more valuable. I had myself back. The woman who'd been invisible for 23 years wasn't invisible anymore. But she also wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't. I wore regular clothes, drove a regular car, lived a regular life that just happened to include running a $100 million foundation. On the 3rd anniversary of Charles's death, I visited his grave. The Whitmore family mausoleum was elaborate, expensive, exactly what you'd expect. I brought flowers. Cheap ones from the grocery store, not fancy arrangements. "I hope I'm doing this right," I said to the headstone. "I hope you can see what I'm building with what you left me. I wish you'd been brave enough to be my father while you were alive. But I'm grateful you were honest enough to try to make it right after you died." I placed the flowers and turned to leave. A man was standing behind me. Mid-60s, black, with kind eyes and a familiar smile. My heart stopped. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "I'm James Morrison. I worked for Charles back in the 70s, when he was building his first hotels." "I'm sorry, I don't. I knew your mother, Ruth. We were friends before she disappeared." He hesitated. "I was actually in love with her. Thought maybe one day, after she got over the father of her baby, we might have a chance." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you should know she didn't just run from an abusive father. She ran because Charles Whitmore threatened her. Told her if she ever contacted him again, if she ever told anyone he was the baby's father, he'd make sure she never saw you again. He had lawyers, power, connections. She believed him." My chest tightened. He threatened her? She was a poor black woman claiming a rich, white man got her pregnant. Who would have believed her in 1972? Charles paid her $10,000 and told her to disappear. She took Grace's identity because she was terrified he'd find her otherwise. So my mother hadn't just been running from her father. She'd been running from Charles too. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Who would I tell? And Ruth made me promise to never speak about it. She said it was the only way to keep you safe. He pulled out an envelope. She left this with me before she died. Said if you ever found out the truth, you should have it. Another letter. Another secret revealed after death. I opened it with shaking hands. Naomi, if you're reading this, you know who your father was. I'm sorry I never told you. I was protecting you the only way I knew how. Charles Whitmore was a powerful man who made it clear I was nothing to him. But you, baby, you were everything to me. I hope you had a good life. I hope you found happiness. I hope you never needed anything from him. But if you did, if somehow his money found its way to you, use it better than he did. Use it to help people like us. Make him pay in death for what he refused to do in life. I love you forever. Mama. I was crying. James handed me a tissue. Your mother was a good woman. Strong, brave, kind. Charles Whitmore didn't deserve her. But she loved you enough to sacrifice everything to keep you safe from him. Thank you for telling me. She'd be proud of what you're doing. Turning his fortune into something that actually helps people. That's exactly what she would have wanted.
He left.
I stood at Charles's grave a while longer. I'd thought the inheritance was about guilt. About a father trying to make amends for abandonment. But it was more than that. It was about power dynamics, about a rich man who'd threatened a poor woman into silence, who'd lived his whole life knowing he had a daughter he'd paid to go away. The anger I felt was clean, clarifying. Charles Whitmore had been more than a coward. He'd been cruel. And the best revenge, the most perfect justice, was taking his money and using it to help women like my mother. Women he'd had the power to help but chose to threaten instead. I went home and wrote a new mission statement for the foundation. We exist to support those with the least power against those with the most. We believe wealth is not a virtue and poverty is not a crime. We honor Ruth Johnson, who survived systems designed to break her, and we work to dismantle those systems for everyone who comes after. It went live on our website that afternoon. By evening, donations were pouring in. Small amounts, mostly. $10, $25, people who'd never had much, but wanted to support the mission. By the end of the week, we'd raised $2 million in small donations. People want to believe change is possible, Maya said, looking at the numbers. You're showing them it is. The foundation kept growing. 5 years after Charles's death, we'd opened 20 shelters, funded legal clinics in 30 cities, helped 15,000 families access affordable housing, and supported legislation that reformed bail practices in 8 states. The original $300 million was down to $90 million. Financial experts called me reckless. The communities we served called me family. I knew which opinion mattered. On a quiet Tuesday morning, I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang. A woman stood on my porch. Young, maybe 25, with a baby on her hip and fear in her eyes. Are you Naomi Brooks? She asked. Yes. I saw your foundation online. I need help. My boyfriend, he's been hitting me. I tried to leave, but I don't have anywhere to go, and I have the baby, and I'm so scared. Come inside, I said immediately. You're safe now. I called Ruth's place, got her a room that afternoon. Got her connected with counseling, legal services, childcare, so she could look for work. 2 weeks later, she sent me a note. Thank you for giving me a chance to start over. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. I knew exactly how she felt, because I'd been invisible too. For 23 years, I'd been furniture in a rich family's house. Then I'd inherited their fortune and became the most visible person in the state. But real visibility wasn't about headlines or wealth. It was about being seen as fully human, as worthy, as someone who mattered. That's what I was trying to give people. The same thing Charles had never given my mother, had barely given me. Recognition.
Dignity.
A chance. I sat at my desk that night and thought about everything that had happened. The inheritance, the betrayal, the discovery of who I really was. The violence, the threats, the sister-in-law who died trying to destroy me. It had been brutal, devastating, world-changing. And I'd do it all again. Because the alternative was staying invisible, staying small, letting powerful people decide my worth. I picked up my phone and recorded a video for the foundation's social media. Hi everyone. I'm Naomi Brooks, and 3 years ago, I inherited $300 million from a father who never claimed me. People ask me all the time what it feels like to go from maid to billionaire. The truth? The money doesn't matter. What matters is the choice I get to make every single day. Do I use this wealth the way it's always been used, to concentrate power in the hands of people who already have it? Or do I use it the way it should be used, to lift up people the system has crushed? I choose lifting up. I choose justice. I choose using every penny I have to make sure no one else has to steal an identity to survive, or work 3 jobs and still can't afford rent, or watch their children grow up without opportunities. That's what this foundation is about.
That's what my life is about now.
And if you want to join us, we'd love to have you. The video went viral. 10 million views in 3 days. Donations poured in. Volunteers signed up. Organizations reached out about partnerships. The movement was bigger than me now. Bigger than Charles's fortune. Bigger than one family's dysfunction playing out in public. It was about changing the conversation around wealth, power, and who deserves what. Maya came over for dinner that weekend. "Mom, you know what I realized?" she said. "What?" "You did exactly what Grandma Ruth couldn't do. You took power from someone who tried to keep you powerless. You made the Whitmore name mean something good. You won." "I didn't win. I just survived and tried to do something useful with what was left." That's what winning looks like for people like us. Survival plus purpose. She was right. I'd survived Charles's abandonment. Survived my mother's secrets. Survived the Whitmore's attacks. Survived the revelation that my entire existence was based on threats and fear and power imbalances. And I turned all of that pain into something that helped other people survive, too. That night, I stood on my back porch and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, my mother was watching. So was Charles, probably regretting every choice that led to his daughter being raised in poverty while he lived in mansions. I hoped they could both see what I'd built. I hoped Ruth knew her sacrifice hadn't been for nothing. I hoped Charles understood that real wealth wasn't money in the bank. It was using what you had to make the world less cruel. My phone buzzed. A text from the foundation's director. "Family number 20,000 just moved into housing. We did it, Naomi. 20,000 families helped. 20,000 families who might have ended up like mine. Struggling, hiding, just trying to survive. Now, they had a chance at something more." I texted back. "That's just the beginning. Let's aim for 100,000. Because that's what this money was for. Not fancy cars or private jets or status symbols. It was for changing lives. For rewriting stories that seemed predetermined. For showing people that the system that kept them down could be challenged, could be changed, could be beaten." I went inside, made myself tea, and sat down to review the next day's schedule. More families to help. More programs to launch. More work to do. And I couldn't wait. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that would outlast me. Something that would help people long after the $300 million was spent. Something that mattered. The maid who inherited a fortune had become the woman who gave it all away. And in doing so, she'd found the one thing money could never buy. Purpose. Before I close the story, I want to talk to you directly. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're going through, I hope this story showed you something important. Power comes in many forms. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's truth. Sometimes it's just the refusal to stay silent when people try to make you small. Naomi started as someone invisible, someone people looked through instead of at. She ended as someone who changed thousands of lives. Not because she was special, but because she refused to accept that powerful people always win. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what part of Naomi's journey resonated with you most. We've got more stories like this coming. Stories about people who refuse to stay down. Stories about justice, truth, and the courage it takes to fight back. Until next time, remember, you're never as powerless as people want you to believe. And sometimes, the best revenge is living well and helping others do the same.
Take care of yourselves.
And keep fighting.